And here are the players for the second annual Gashimov Memorial 2015 in memory of Ugar Gashimov, who passed away in 2014. He's a great player, good guy too. He'll be sorely missed. Magnus Carlsen needs no introduction. World champion, #1 rated in the world. Fabiano Caruana, Italian-American. #2, sometimes 3 in the world. Vishanan from India, former world champion. Getting older, but he's still formidable. Anish Giri from the Netherlands. Great world-class player. Wesley So just recently changed his federation in the United States. After a tough U.S. championship, he'll be looking for revenge. Vladimir Kramnik. I mean, who's... the guy's still a monster. Former world champion from Russia. Maxime Vichy-Lagrave from France. Top world-class player. Don't take Maxime lightly. Mamajarov from Azerbaijan, the home country of the tournament. Top world-class player. Raf Mamanjov, I believe it's pronounced, also from Azerbaijan, top player in Azerbaijan. And I picked Mickey Adams, Michael Adams from England last. Mickey and I we're only one day apart on our birthdays. So there they are, folks. The 10 players in the second annual Gashimov Memorial 2015. Hi folks, John Cordisco back again. Round 3 of the second annual Gashimov Memorial Chess Tournament in honor of Ugar Gashimov, who died about 1.5 years ago. He was a great player, good guy too. It's being played in Azerbaijan, where he's from. 2 top world-class players playing as white. Fabiano Caruana, Italian-American. Top 3 in the world. Him and my buddy Carl go back and forth from 2nd and 3rd place in the world. And someone that needs no introduction in the chess world is black. Magnus Carlsen, a current world champion. Interesting game because it's a Dutch. Dutch are really cool at this level. I ought to start playing the Dutch myself instead of the King's Indian. King's Indian is a lot more fun though. The Dutch is close. C6, knight f3, d5, castles, bishop, b3, queen e7, bishop b2. The thing about the Dutch is a poor light squared bishop for black. He's hemmed in for a long time. Double fianchetto, b6, knight, bishop, knight, castles, Rex c1. Well, let's take a pause here. Computer's on off screen. About a quarter pawn advantage for white, typical. That's a very strong knight there. Is black willing to give up the dark squared bishop to get rid of that knight? That's the thing. Especially in the Stonewall Dutch, where all the pawns for black are on light squares. That's his good bishop, and it's his very good bishop. a5 from Magnus. Fabiano goes e3. Now he goes knight to a6, and I'll tell you the truth, I like knight b d7, and the computer that and knight to a6 is neck and neck. Of course, you can't really play knight here and then later take, because once pawn takes, of course, you lose a piece because the pawn's hitting both. That bishop on b2 is a freaking monster. So he goes knight a6 instead. He wasn't going to take anyway, so I guess knight to d7 was pretty much the same. Knight to b1. Interesting. Interesting. That's a move I didn't expect. The computer likes f4, and I do as well. And queen to e2. Knight on d to f3. Bring another knight over. But he decides he wants to go there. Apparently he's going to bring it up somewhere else. We'll have to see. Bishop takes. Pawn takes. Knight to e4. Queen e2. And all of a sudden, it's a small advantage for black. Right off the shoot. I'm not an expert on the Dutch, but this is a really neat position. That pawn on e5 is very interesting. a4. And according to the computer, queen e2, the prior move was the last book move. Knight to c3. He wanted it there instead. Just whatever was worth department. And if those of you that wanted to go bishop to a3 after knight to b4, f3. Not much you can do with that pin, to be honest with you. Knight to c3, a takes, queen to b4. Magnus gets his queen right in there, right in the heart of black's position. Computer says it's basically even. Tiny advantage for black at best. This is interesting. Black's gotten rid of his good bishop. That knight's in a weird spot. And the bishop on b2, or excuse me, b7, is pretty much biting against granite there, but it's got a small advantage for black. Knight takes. F takes and D takes is about the same for the computer. It's probably a matter of taste. He decided to go D takes instead. Queen to C2. Knight C5. Interesting. It's just one of these things about Magnus and a lot of the great players is they slowly creep up on you. You don't even notice. You call it the frog in the water theory, where you put a frog in room temperature water and slowly turn up the heat, and they don't even notice until it's too hot and they can't take it anymore. It's one of those weird things where you just don't notice the heat getting turned up. And the same thing with Magnus. Bishop c3. Computer shows it as even, but I still like white, to be perfectly frank. It's funny how both of these bishops here are basically facing off against each other, but they're all biting on granite. Queen takes, knight takes, rook b1. Of course, that wasn't a loss of a pawn, just temporarily. The knight goes to c5, rook takes, knight a4. Trying to give the rook some grief. Besides a trade this way. And Wei still gets to keep the bishop, but that bishop is buried good and solid. Yeah, he can get out with bishop f1 and then move him around. It takes a lot of time. Rook d7, he's coming up behind the pawns. Rook comes over, rook takes, rook a1. He's going to get his bishop out now. Rook to d8, bishop f1. c5. I think that was a conscious decision on Magnus's part to get that pawn on a dark square. That's just my opinion. Rook to a3, hitting the knight. The knight comes to b1. Rook moves. Knight to d2, hitting the bishop. Bishop just moves. There's no bank break problems anymore for white. The little scenario the computer gave was king to g2, knight f3, rook a6, king f7, rook a7, king f8. That knight's in a good spot as well. After bishop to e2, knight to f3. Of course, the knight's not stuck there. He can get out. Bishop takes, pawn takes, h3. Now it's slowly creeping up on white here. It's a small advantage for black, but h5. Now the computer likes king h2, h4. I agree. But I think this is where Fabiano, I think, buckles a little bit under the pressure. g4. After pawn takes, h4 instead. Second choice in the computer was pawn takes. And I think all of us would have done that in a second. But of course, again, we're not Magnus Carlsen. He plays the correct move, h4. King comes up. I guess he thought the idea was eventually get the king up here and pick up this pawn. But this pawn here is now stopping that. Rook to d2. King to h3. g5. Oh boy, look at this mess. What on earth is he going to do? e4. Rook c2, rook e2, rook d4. Magnus decides on rook to d4. Not as good as taking the pawn, those of you that are wondering, because after checks, king, checks, king, checks, king takes. Look at this. Can you move? Can you go anywhere? It's stalemate. King's going to have to move. Interesting how these things pop up out of nowhere. Rook checks king. And this is where Fabiano stumbles again, I think, but it's a very human move. Very human. Rook to a3. Rook takes. Rook takes. King moves. Rook to e3. I mean, look at this white's poor pawns. Rook, f3. White's just suffering now. Pawn. Rook to a3. Rook to d3. Of course, you can't take it. King. King tries to come over. c3. Here comes the pawn. Rook to a4. It's a 5-point advantage now for black. c2. Rook to c4. He has to go there. Rook checks. Rook comes up. King d7. Here comes the king. c5. Rook f2 is going after the other pawn. f4. If you're going to lose, you might as well push it. Checks. King. And rook takes. And that's it. That's where Fabiano Caruana says, I had enough. He resigns. So there you are. A great game. Those rook pawn endings are just monstrous. I got to tell you, the two people I think play the best endings to the top players are Magnus and Carl Nakamura. Especially rook pawn endings. It's one of those oxymorons in chess. The less amount of pieces there are on the board, the more complicated and more precise you have to be. Anyway, folks, that's the game from round 3. I hope you enjoyed it from the Gashimov Memorial Chess Tournament 2015. And I want you all to remember, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.